So the readings today, the Al-Anon reading is splendidly brief. I'm putting it in the chat. Concept 7, the trustees have legal rights, while the rights of the conference are traditional. And the AA readings, there's the short form of concept 7 and the long form, which I'm putting in there. Reference. The short form is the one I'm going to read, though. The Charter and bylaws of the General Service Board are legal instruments empowering the trustees to manage and conduct World Service affairs. The Conference Charter is not a legal document, relies upon tradition and the AA purse for final effectiveness. Now, I'm going to present this presuming that people don't know anything about the concepts already, just in case. There are some for whom they're new or relatively new, or maybe people are rusty. The concepts are a way of getting things done. And in Al-Anon, who's in charge? God's in charge. How does God speak? Effectively through each individual's private consciousness as expressed when they speak at group conscience meetings. The groups elect general service representatives, group representatives to be delegates. And these come together like tributaries of a river, streams, and then little rivulets, and then a single river, which culminates, gives out into conference, which is the voice of Al-Anon as a whole, but conference meets only rarely. Someone's got to do the actual business of running the offices and maintaining the finances and telephone offices and literature and all of the public relations, all of the other things that Al-Anon as a whole has to do, issuing guidelines as society changes on how to handle those changes. Okay, very good. Now, who has to do that? The board has to do that. And they don't do everything themselves. They have subcommittees, and they have corporations, and they have staffs, and they have lots and lots of busybodies to do the busy things in the material world. And there is a fundamental distinction here between the decision-making, the large decisions, final decisions on large matters of general policy and finance, those big decisions, and there aren't many at all, only a few a year, that sits with the conference. The implementation is the board. The conference is like the government, and the board is like the civil service, which carries out what the government wants through innumerable offices and officers. And the question is, who's in charge? Who's in charge really? And you've got a bit of a problem because according to the structure, conference is in charge. However, conference isn't there most of the time. If you want to ask something, let's say conference is in April. If you want to ask something and it's September, you're stuffed. You have to wait till the following April. And if you have to ask on everything, by the time you get to conference, nothing will have been done for 6 months, and you've got 400 questions, and conference can't possibly get its head around all of those questions. So you've got real delegation of, well, delegated authority, responsibility, and accountability to the board. And so we've got a balance here. Who writes the checks? The board does. Not conference. Who does the hiring and firing? It's the board, it's not conference. It looks, in a material sense, in the world, it looks like the board is in charge, and the conferences just go la, 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 la once a year. And then the board just gets on with what it wants to get on with. It looks like the board is running things. And in a legal sense, that's the case. So if something goes wrong, it's the board whose head is on the chopping board. It's not the conference. Conference can't manually interfere in the board's running. There are measures it can take for a different conference. So the board is empowered to get on with it. However, the conference is not out of the picture altogether. Firstly, what is the board doing and why? It's not there for itself. It's not, at least in principle, it's not there for itself. The structure of Al-Anon is not there for its own benefit. It is there for the benefit of its members who are further upstream. So it is not there to protect its own interests. It's not there to achieve its own goals. Without the conference saying, these are our aims, there is nothing by which the board can decide even what to do. So they might have all the legal power in the world, but they have no purpose. They have no mind. Secondly, to do anything in the material world, if you want to buy a cucumber or an aubergine, you have to have some money to go and buy it. You can't just, well, you can steal it, but there are consequences. The board to do anything, it has to get money from somewhere. It's not allowed to fundraise. It relies on the fellowship of Al-Anon to do that. Now, something's gone slightly wrong there, and it started to rely on the sale of literature to provide a surplus to run its own affairs. And as a result of that, it's overprotective. It is taken ownership of the literature, and it's very sparing in its offering of permission to Al-Anon groups to use the literature. It's very circumscribed when and how you can use literature in meetings. Why? Because they want you to buy the literature. Why? Because Al-Anon is not supporting its own services. This isn't the board's fault. This is Al-Anon's fault. People won't put their money in their pocket and pay money into the structure. So the structure has to rely on literature sales, and it has to protect the literature and make sure that whenever anyone uses the literature, they're damn well paying for it. Very interesting. Literature written by not the board, but by Al-Anon members. So you can see where concept 7 is being fundamentally breached. The literature, by making a margin, means that the board is raising its own money and holding the Al-Anon fellowship hostage to do it, using the material that the Al-Anon fellowship provided it. It's created a shift in power. It's against this is my personal view, it's against concept 7. Concept 7, it should be the Al-Anon fellowship freely offering enough money to the structure so that it runs itself without the board and the structure having to make a margin on the literature in order to fund itself. Now, the reason this is so important, if the board and its structures are dependent on the fellowship for their money, they'll have to do what the fellowship wants in terms of guidance, because then if they don't, the money will stop, then they can't do it. So these two ideas of the tradition, the conference having traditional authority and the power of the purse, the ability effectively to cut off the flow of funds if the board doesn't do what the fellowship wants. Those two are integrally linked. That's what closes the circle of accountability. It means the board in principle should be accountable to the fellowship. As with the traditions and the concepts, there are all sorts of ways, however, in which the ideas contained can be used in one's everyday life. And it's very interesting. There's a link between concept 7 and step 11. Step 11, it talks about seeking only knowledge of God's will for us, the power to carry that out. That's very, very much like what the board seeks from the fellowship. It seeks knowledge of the fellowship's will and the power, in other words, the money, to carry it out. I've got to recognize and I'm here in the position as the board, and God is in the position speaking through the conference. I should not be acting on my own account. I must always remember I am acting on behalf of a higher power in everything I do. And I should be seeking knowledge of God's will for me, not knowledge of my will for me. It's ever so interesting. I talk to a lot of people, and very interesting people. If you tell them that, they become rather cagey, however. They become a little bit nervous about saying things if they know what they say is of interest to you. But I've heard people, I've done it, after step 3, using the phrases "I want" or "I don't want," as if that's got anything to do with anything. It's praying for knowledge of God's will for me, not praying for knowledge of my wants for myself. That's not what I'm supposed to be getting. And the power to carry that out. So I don't have to rely on my own ability to make a living. It's very difficult to make a living if you're making it yourself. Fortunately, I don't have to make one because I've taken step 3. I do God's will, money appears in my bank account. Now, in a practical sense, I have to obey the laws of the world, which is what the board does. It obeys the laws of the world. And that includes things like gravity. So I don't foolishly jump out of a window hoping that God is going to send angels to lift me up at the last moment, to stop me dashing my foot and indeed the rest against the pavings. I'm still at the mercy, in some sense, of the laws of the world. Why? Because I believe them and I'm still here. That's why I'm at their mercy. I'm not really at their mercy. It's only my belief that I'm fundamentally here that me apparently at their mercy. Like in the Matrix, are subject to the laws of that created world only if they believe in it. As soon as they stop believing in it, I'm invincible. It's very fair for people to actually transcend that in our world. I am not the source of my own supply. If I'm frightened, I think I am, because I know I'm inadequate to produce my own supply. Everything I get, all the power I get, act in the material world. And I have to play the game of the world, fine. If you want a job, you have to apply for one, probably. Go to a job centre, labour exchange, recruitment consultant. This is playing the game of the world. This is complying with the laws that are established. Another good example of that is, in a real sense, no one can ever harm anyone else because we are spirit. However, I'm subject to the laws of the world. If I hurt someone in the material world and they feel, and I've done something wrong and they feel hurt, I need to clear that up. There are 2 levels here, the metaphysical level and the physical level. They're in a relationship of paradox, one with the other. You don't have to reconcile them, different realms. I've always got to remember that my feet are on the ground with God, with you and other people. My head is up in the clouds with God. And that is what board are doing. They act in the material world, but their resources and their guidance should come from the conference, in other words, from God. And also, I want to speak briefly about the notion of final effectiveness. It talks about that. It relies on the force of tradition and the power of the AA purse for its final effectiveness. The effectiveness of anything in my life or in the world has got nothing to do with what is apparent in the world. The measure of my worth, and this I believe to be true for anyone, the measure of my worth or success or anything in the world is not measured here, and I cannot see it. And so it is not up to me to look at my life and work out, is it worthwhile or not? Uh, or even to look at any particular action, say, is it worthwhile or not? The laws of cause and effect operate largely unseen. I can't see the effect of anything I do. There is final effectiveness which lies beyond the horizon of sight. This is why I have to trust God, not my own human judgment. Mercifully, that's all I've got. Where are we? I'm going to stop the recording now.